On a hot August day in 1392, a king rode into a forest with his knights, sword drawn, and started killing his own men. He wasn't tricked. He wasn't betrayed. Something inside his mind simply broke, and it never fully healed again. For the next 30 years, the King of France would believe, at times, that he was made of glass, that his own wife was a stranger, that he had no name, no crown, no kingdom at all. His court would call him Charles the Well-Beloved. History remembers him as Charles the Mad. To understand how Charles broke, you need to understand the pressure he was born into. Charles VI became King of France in 1380 at just 11 years old. He inherited a country in the middle of the 100 Years' War, a brutal on and off conflict with England that had already been grinding on for over 40 years. He also inherited a court full of powerful uncles, all of them more interested in France's treasury than in France's future. For nearly 8 years, these regents, chief among them Philip the Bold of Burgundy, ran the kingdom, drained its coffers, and quietly expected the boy to grow into a puppet they could keep controlling. Charles didn't cooperate. In 1388, at 20 years old, he pushed his uncles aside and declared he would rule in his own right, surrounding himself instead with a group of younger, reform-minded advisors that chroniclers nicknamed the Marmousets, roughly the Little Grotesques, a jab from the old guard who resented losing power. For 4 years, this arrangement actually worked. Charles was popular. He was called the Beloved. France, exhausted from war and mismanagement, seemed to be stabilizing. Then came the summer of 1392. In the spring of 1392, one of Charles's close advisors, Olivier de Clisson, was ambushed and nearly killed in the streets of Paris by a knight named Pierre de Craon, a man acting, many suspected, with the quiet blessing of Charles's own uncle, the Duke of Brittany. Charles was furious. He decided to personally lead an army into Brittany to punish the Duke and hunt down Craon. It was the height of summer. Charles was reportedly already unwell, feverish, sleepless, irritable for weeks. His doctors advised him not to travel. He went anyway. On August 5th, 1392, the royal column moved through a forest near Le Mans. The heat was brutal, according to multiple chroniclers, including Jean Froissart. A page riding near the king dozed off and dropped a lance, which clattered loudly against a helmet. Something in Charles snapped. He apparently believed he was under attack, that enemies were closing in on him from within his own escort. He drew his sword and charged, not at some invisible enemy, but at his own men. Chroniclers described him cutting down several of his own knights before he could be subdued. One account says it took multiple men to physically restrain him, and that he had to be tied down and carried away in a cart, rigid and unresponsive. He didn't recognize his own brother. He didn't recognize his own name. For days, the king lay in a stupor. When he woke, he had no memory of the episode at all. France now had a serious, unavoidable problem. A king who could, without warning, become a danger to the people around him, including himself. What followed was not one illness, but a recurring pattern that would plague Charles for the rest of his life. Roughly 44 documented episodes over 3 decades, according to court records. During these episodes, Charles would sometimes forget he was king entirely. He'd fail to recognize his wife, Isabeau of Bavaria, and his own children. At times, he denied having a wife or children at all. But the detail that made him legendary, the one that still shows up in psychology textbooks today, was his belief that he was made of glass. Convinced that his body was fragile enough to shatter at the slightest impact, Charles reportedly refused to let people touch him. He had iron rods sewn into the lining of his clothing, a kind of hidden armor meant to protect his glass body from breaking if someone bumped into him. This wasn't a one off rumor. It's documented well enough that historians and psychiatrists still reference it as one of the earliest and most famous recorded cases of what's now called glass delusion, a rare psychological condition where a person believes part or all of their body is made of glass. During his episodes, Charles would go weeks without bathing or changing clothes, sometimes refusing to wash at all. At other times, he'd be lucid enough to rule, sign documents, and receive ambassadors, only to relapse days or weeks later. His court tried nearly everything to help him. Physicians, exorcists, and self declared healers were all brought in. One healer allegedly attempted to physically beat the demons out of him. Musicians and even a form of early theater troupe were reportedly hired to try to shock him back to lucidity through performance and surprise, an episode sometimes called the Bal des Ardents, the Ball of the Burning Men, where a costume dance nearly killed the king when the performers' flammable costumes caught fire from a torch. Charles survived, saved by his aunt smothering the flames with her skirts, but 4 of the dancers burned to death in front of him. Modern historians and doctors, looking back with the benefit of medical knowledge Charles's court never had, have proposed diagnoses ranging from schizophrenia to bipolar disorder to porphyria. None of these can be confirmed with certainty from historical records alone, but what's clear is that the king was suffering repeatedly and publicly from something his era had no real framework to treat. Here's the part of the story that turns personal tragedy into national catastrophe. Charles's incapacity didn't just leave a power vacuum, it created one that lasted decades, and the people who rushed to fill it very nearly destroyed France in the process. 2 factions emerged, both technically loyal to the crown, both actually fighting for control of it: the Burgundians, led by the Duke of Burgundy, and the Armagnacs, led by rivals including the king's own brother, Louis of Orleans. In 1407, the conflict turned lethal. Louis of Orleans was assassinated in the streets of Paris on the orders of the Duke of Burgundy, the king's own cousin. This didn't end the rivalry. It ignited a civil war that ran alongside the ongoing war with England, splitting France into competing loyalties, while its king drifted in and out of reality. Meanwhile, England's King Henry V watched all of this from across the Channel and recognized an opportunity most conquerors could only dream of: a kingdom fighting itself. In 1415, Henry invaded and delivered a devastating defeat to French forces at the Battle of Agincourt, a battle France, with its full strength united, likely would have won. By 1420, the damage to Charles's authority and to France's cohesion was so severe that the king's own government signed the Treaty of Troy. Under intense pressure, and during one of Charles's periods of incapacity, the treaty effectively disinherited his own son, the future Charles VII, and named Henry V of England as heir to the French throne instead. The Mad King, still alive, still nominally in power, had been maneuvered into signing away his own dynasty's succession in favor of the very country France had been fighting for generations. Charles VI died in 1422 at 53 years old, having reigned, if you can call it that, for 42 years. His funeral was reportedly sparse and somber, a quiet end for a king whose reign had been anything but. By most accounts, the common people of Paris didn't hate him. Despite everything, Charles the Beloved seemed to retain a strange public sympathy, perhaps because everyone understood in some instinctive way that he was a sick man rather than a cruel one. His legacy, though, was catastrophic by any political measure. The power vacuum his illness created fed a civil war invited a foreign invasion and led directly to a treaty that tried to erase his own family's claim to the throne. It would take his son, Charles VII, with crucial help from a teenage peasant girl named Joan of Arc, just a few years after his death, to begin clawing the kingdom back. Charles VI is often reduced to a strange historical footnote, the king who thought he was glass. But his story is really about something a lot heavier. What happens to a nation when the person at the very top of it is quietly, repeatedly, unable to hold reality together, and what people are willing to do to a broken man for the sake of power. If you found this one interesting, there are plenty more mad monarchs through history worth digging into, some with genuine documented illness, some who were probably just politically inconvenient and got labeled insane by rivals. Let me know in the comments who you'd want covered next. Subscribe if you want more of these deep dives, and I'll see you in the next one.